first of all, could you tell me who is Ernest Bramah?
Ernest Bramah. He was a novelist, he was a journalist, he was a very obscure person because he didn't make his history very much known, so he was a bit of a mystery. But he's most famous for writing two sets of short stories. The Wallet of Kai Lung, which was published in the very early 20th century, about a sort of made-up Chinese sage and mystic who was also quite funny. And there was a huge vogue for these Kai Lung short stories. So that really made Bramah's name. But after the First World War, he also published a series of stories called about the blind detective called Max Carados, which are really good. I think they're better than Sherlock Holmes. And they too had a vogue. And they're also very interesting because it's unusual to have a disabled principal character. But in between these two swathes of creative writing, he wrote this extraordinary novel, What Might Have Been.
Can you tell us about the publication history of this particular book and when it was first published?
Okay. So What Might Have Been was first published in 1907 by John Murray, which is a really prestigious London publisher. Lord Byron was published by John Murray. And it didn't sell very well. 2 years later, Thomas Nelson and Sons, which was a Scottish publisher, then employing the novelist John Buchan, decided they wanted this novel in its cheap series of 7-penny editions, and I'm pretty sure that John Buchan chose it because it's very much up his street. The 7-penny editions was a new fashion in publishing, producing cheap editions, very much like Wordsworth Classics today, to allow the public to buy books which were popular and quite new, but at very low prices. But the deal was, Nelson wanted to get rid of all the science fiction elements, though they had to keep the flying machines, and they wanted to get rid of a lot of the fun. They made it a much darker, dramatic novel by cutting 7,000 words, and they also retitled it to be called The Secret of the League. And it sold really well. I think the calculations are, as The Secret of the League, the novel sold about 350,000 copies in about 60 years, which is a big amount.
So could you tell me why you've chosen to go to publish this version rather than the original version, rather than the edited version?
Right. I decided that I wanted to go back to the original version. I wasn't interested in publishing an edition that had been changed by publishers. I wanted to go back to the author's original vision. And the idea was that we would try and find the 7,000 words. So Jeremy Hawthorne, who wrote the introduction, and I worked together by finding all the digital editions we could find, plus his own print editions, and he did the patchwork and restored the text. So we had our 7,000 words back, and it was a really fat book, as you can see. This is the biggest book we've ever done. And it's a good meaty read. And I really think it's improved it. It's gone back to what Bramah originally wanted. It's so much funnier. It's light, because his satire and his wit really balance the dark political intrigue and the sort of social commentary that he got very aroused about. Whereas the Nelson edition of 1909 was just a bit too gloomy.
Can you tell me what it's about and what's the plot in a nutshell, and what are its major themes?
Okay. What Might Have Been is about the conservative resistance against corrupt Labour Party rule in an alternative future in which there are flying machines, coded typewriters and the invention of the fax machine. And it's also a satire on British politics. The extremes of conservative resistance and dreadful Labour rule are really so extreme as they have to be taken as caricatures. There's a lot of social commentary, and there's a lot of realist writing about what it's like working in an office, because one of the leading characters is a young woman who joins the conservative resistance, takes a job as a typist in the office where all the political manoeuvring is going on, and very cleverly works out there's a spy in the office and understands how to unmask the spy. And later she is the one who's holding the fort against the raging riot of Londoners who are furious at what has happened with the politics of the day, and I'm not going to go into spoilers. And so she has to be rescued from this burning building which is being attacked by the London mob. So there's a good strong role for a woman. There's 2 or 3 very strong roles for male characters. The flying machines are just spectacular. They're also very funny in the right setting. And it's just a joy. It takes you through an Edwardian's vision of the future with a lot of humour, but a lot of real political intent as well. If I had to choose between light thriller dystopia or science fiction, which is what Jeremy classified the book as variously, I would go for dystopia, because it is about society as we really don't want to see it, with a government run by inept and incompetent politicians. And also you have the glorious science fiction element of the flying machine, and also there's an amazing car chase, and you get a terrific naval battle. You know, all the elements are used, but it's all completely impossible. So it has to be dystopia, I think.
But it is a really fine example of early science fiction as well.
I think it is. I think it's a very good example of early British science fiction in the H.G. Wells mode. Clearly Wells was the great innovator, and Bramah is following him very closely. But he's writing at the same time as well, so he's also introducing his own ideas. I don't think Wells did anything as clever as this particular flying machine. His imagination was far more expansive and it was more interested in time and philosophies. But the mechanics of the flying machine Bramah goes into in great detail, down to the inventor and how the patent was filed and so on.
Who is the readership this book will appeal to, do you think? What other authors will they like?
I think the readers who like H.G. Wells, early H.G. Wells, will love this book. This is absolutely for them. Also for people who like Jules Verne. There's a lot in here that Verne might have been writing about. And Verne had only, I think Verne was still alive when this book was being written. I think he died in the mid-1910s. People are interested in early science fiction, how science fiction develops, and also people interested in political fiction, how fiction is used by Disraeli and those who followed him to promote not only political ideology, but ideas about how society could and should change. And it's a rip-roaring thriller, if you like dramatic action and lots of people zipping about doing dangerous dramatic things. It's full of that.
Excellent. And lastly, why did you want to publish this book?
I wanted to publish this book because it was a riot. I just thought, I've never read this before. This is amazing. It was recommended to me. When I set up the company, I had never heard of this novel. I knew Bramah because I really liked the Max Carados stories, but a friend of mine said, you really need to talk to my former supervisor Jeremy, who is obsessed with Bramah because he wants to republish this novel. And my idea was I want to republish forgotten fiction, and this was so forgotten even I hadn't read it. And when I read it, I was completely bowled over. It was just, this is it, I've got to get this book out again because nobody else is doing it, so I have to.
So it was the first book you published as Handheld Press, wasn't it?
It was.
Was that by design? Did you want this? Did you want it to be the first book? Was it sort of? Did it have that place in your head as being? I'm going to launch my new company with this book.
No, it didn't. I was working on 2 or 3 books at the same time, and this one came out the first because it was ready first. It came into production soonest because Jeremy wrote the introduction really quickly. The text was there. Ta-da! There was nothing to stop us. The next book was John Buck and the Renegades Club, which I was working on, but I had to do this before I could get my introduction written. And the 3rd book came out in February, so because somebody else was writing that one. So it was production schedules. It wasn't for marketing design.